Hey folks, how you doing? Jen and I here again today for the second installment of our Mixed Media Moods YouTube challenge. And you can see our mood board this month is it's got a lot of teals and blues and natural colors and some ships and some fibers and some wood kind of stuff going on. And so I've put together an ATC set using some jelly printed backgrounds that I've done. So sometimes at night when I'm watching TV or I'm just kicking back with the husband, maybe while he's playing video games, or even if we're hanging out with our kiddo or something, and I just need to do some art, or maybe I even just need to relax or whatever it is, then I love to get out my jelly plate. And this is a Jelly Arts jelly plate that I use. It's 8 by 10 inches. And then I cut some just plain cardstock, 8.5 by 11 in half. And then I jelly print on that, and I use stencils and stamps and mark makers. And my favorite paint to use when jelly printing is the Dina Wakley Heavy Body Paint by Ranger Ink. I just really love how smooth it goes on, how even it and easily it is to roll out. And I can do some really great things with it. It comes in beautiful, beautiful colors that I don't have to mess with, but are easily mixable if I so choose. Yeah, so those are the basics. I didn't show you the jelly printing specifically, but I gave you enough information you can kind of gather how I got to this point. So I did some jelly printing, and I used some Unwow Studio stencils, and I used one of Dina's stencils, I believe. I'll double check that and let you know. And then just with some backgrounds that I had, I cut out some favorite pieces of them, different patterns, and I kept with those teals and blues, and I brought in the gray, and I kept the white. And now that I have those kind of 6 backgrounds chosen, I am going to cover them in clear gesso by Liquitex. And the reason is because where there isn't paint, it's just straight up cardstock. And I know that I want to get kind of mixed media-ish on these and kind of have fun and play and build. And sometimes cardstock doesn't act the best. So I don't want it to buckle or warp or tear or anything like that. So by just laying down my clear gesso, then I can just reinforce those backgrounds and then continue to build on top of those with almost anything I want. So yeah, I just gave them a quick cover with clear gesso, and you can see here it comes out of the bottle when it's wet. It's still pretty white, but as it dries, then it's completely clear. So just heating those now, making sure that's done. And you can see the card's got a tiny bit warbly, but it's no big deal. Nothing a nice flat press can't fix there. So you'll see me set my cards up like this fairly often, and the exact placement of them is going to change, but when I'm working on pieces like this and I'm kind of going back and forth and creating a cohesive piece, I work a little bit on each piece. I just work better that way rather than working completely on one, finishing it, and moving on. So I will put my pieces back in the middle and kind of re-examine where I'm at. Here I have sewn a piece of muslin onto one of the cards, kind of bringing in that fibrous part from the inspirational, the challenge, the mood board. And I sewed that on and then stapled some scrappy strings to the edge. Now I've got one of my designs for Viva Las Vegas stamps. It came from a really fun art journaling board, and I've just stamped that in Ranger Ink Archival Black Soot ink. And these are some paint pens by Delusions, Ranger Ink from Diane Reevely. And it's kind of a love-hate relationship with me. I'm still working with them and having fun with them. I think the only thing I don't like is, funny enough, still how big the tip is. And I understand that it has to be that way because it's a paint pen. I definitely get that. I'm just kind of still getting used to how thick that really is. But it's great because it's a pen with paint in it. And it's like almost like a felt tip, like the tip is still really nice and thin. So I used that to do a little bit of doodling around that stamp. And now I've got some golden fluid acrylic and carbon black. I've added a tiny bit of water, and I've got one of my favorite brushes from Simply Simmons. It's a script brush. You can get them from a lot of different companies. I just have this one, so it's the one I use. And I really like Simply Simmons too. It's an affordable paintbrush company by Daler Rowney. And it's affordable, and they're fairly good quality as well. I like the handles, they're comfortable, all of that kind of stuff. And now I've got out some various mark makers, and this happens to be just a recycled lid, comes from a spray bottle of some type, and I'm making some marks with some of that leftover paint that I have. And then this one is a lid, I think, that goes to, oh no, I'm sorry, this is a button. So it's just, it has a thicker lip compared to the lid, so you can see the difference in the circles there. They're fairly similar sized, but the lip, the actual surface that touches the paper, is a lot bigger. If you watched my most recent video, or maybe the last two, I really like to heat some paint dry, and then to where it only dries around the edge, and then I lift the wet paint back out of the middle, and it creates this kind of halo effect. I did have a little bit of trouble with it here because I put down that clear gesso, and the clear gesso has a ton of tooth to it. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're going to clear gesso something. It gets very gritty, and sometimes it just doesn't matter how much you scrub. Some of that stuff, paint or whatever you're working on, is going to get stuck in the grit. And that came out okay too, because it was kind of fun to have that dinginess. And now I've got out a Stabilo pencil, a Marks All pencil, and it's water reactive. So I'm using that script brush and some clean water to activate the pencil and kind of draw it out away from the circle in a gradient or halo-ish effect. I really love Stabilo. I get all of my inspiration from other artists, and tons of people use Stabilo for tons of different things. You know, I can say like Ray Missickman uses it, Donna Downey uses it, Robin Marie Smith. I mean, all kinds of people use a Stabilo, and it is definitely a staple in my toolkit now. You can see here, I just kind of drew some lines on this teal stripe that I had on this card, and I'm activating it this time with a stiffer paintbrush that has more bristles on it, because I wanted a little bit chunkier line. Easy as that. And then I let that dry just like that, and it's fun, and it's a great addition. Oh yeah, now I've got some titanium white golden fluid acrylic, and I thought that it would be very cool if these circles were stark white, where they overlapped between the white and then the paint. The three colors of paint that I'm using from Dina Wakley that I had jelly printed with, it's the turquoise, it's the midnight, and it's the elephant. So I'll definitely list those in the supply list below. I'm going to go over these circles a couple times because it is fluid acrylic. So it does have some opacity to it, but that also depends on how thick you put the paint down. So rather than putting it very thick and then having to wait a long time for it to dry, I did 3 or 4 thinner layers. And then as they layer on top of each other, then the opacity comes back to the paint, and I'm not having to wait as long for the dry time. Also, if you apply heat to an acrylic-based product like this, and it has two things: if it's a little bit thick, and if your heat gun is a little bit high, or you hold it in one place for a long time and it heats the same spot, the acrylic medium will bubble. So keep that in mind. Sometimes that's a desired effect, and sometimes not so much. I had a little bit of that paint left over, so then I added some water to it and splattered it around on some of these cards like I did the black. I do also want to point out, if it's heavier on paint than it is on water, then the acrylic paint is going to be a little bit glossy, which is actually kind of cool because it's a bit different than the other matte things we've been working with up to this point. And there was a little bit left, and I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do with it, so I decided to white out the middle of that muslin. And at the time, my intention was to actually stamp directly onto it, but you'll see towards the end of the video, I just step away from that just a tiny bit. And here you can see this is me like kind of getting an idea of where my cards are and how they're all playing together, and kind of figuring out too like what kind of position I want them to hold together. Because I really like to display my sets like this as a set. And this is a seed stamp that I have from Viva Las Vegas Stamps, and the stencil that I used when I was jelly printing was from Dina Wakley. So this is so super exciting to me. I'm going to do this all the time now. So I'm making sure my card is flat so that I don't mess up stamping, but I'm repeating that pattern exactly where it is with this seed stamp that I designed for Viva Las Vegas Stamps. and it is almost identical. Look at that. It is so stinking cool. It's kind of like a screen print because the color from the stencil just goes out a tiny bit on the outside of the stamp. Oh man, it made me so happy. It's such a cool, happy accident. Oh, I love it. Love it, love it. Definitely going to have to kind of use that as a focal point in another piece. Although as I kind of played with these cards, I kind of kept going back to, and it was my focal point anyways. Here I've gone back. I wanted to include some of that handwriting that I had used before, and so I did it on that like really nice heavy kind of navy colored strip, and then I didn't really end up liking it, but I thought I should also repeat it in white over here on the teal, and it's not showing up as well, but the idea is there. So just kind of keeping the same elements throughout the pieces, not necessarily on every one of them, but repeating often enough that they're cohesive in something besides just the color. Oh, and I got out some gesso. Now, I did go kind of back and forth between the titanium white and the gesso. And, you know, it's just kind of what I picked up first in my hand, or kind of what I had in my brain, kind of what I wanted to do. And what I really wanted to do was scrape some white across some of these pieces and cover up kind of some of the stark edges that I had. You can see there, it started to smear the pen, the Delusions paint pen that I had used, because it wasn't dry yet. So then I ended up wiping it all off and kind of going back over it with white, which I actually really enjoyed, because then that line, that navy line on the last card, wasn't so harsh, and it kind of looked like the white was spilling over into it. So that was very cool. And I just kind of scraped it in some places, and where it got too thick, or if it ended up somewhere I didn't exactly want it, then I just wiped it off with a baby wipe, and then went back in and tried again. And I scraped a few here and a few there, and then at one point I also kind of go back in and, oh, I did add some staples here, because I stapled earlier where I did the muslin, and I was kind of talking about that before, like the cohesiveness. Then I kept, I wanted more staples on another card, basically. And here you can see I'm just going back in and kind of darkening up some of the white in some of the areas. And it's really fun. It's a cool technique to kind of just scrape some gesso across your cards. Oh, and also, I don't remember when, I stapled some X's in those 3 circles. And now I've kind of drawn a couple circles inside the circles around the staples with the Stabilo. And here I had some gray twine that I was kind of trying to decide how to incorporate, and it just wasn't really, I couldn't really find a place necessarily that I wanted it. I like the idea of more fibers, and especially in the gray color, because I kind of had that warmer elephant color happening from the Dina Wakley paint. And I even kind of just dropped it down to see what would happen, but nothing came to mind. So just nixed that. Sometimes stuff just doesn't work out. I activated that Stabilo that I had drawn around the X's with. Oh, and then here, this was a scrap laying on my table. So this came from a Viva Las Vegas stamp. And it's a really great stamp, actually. And I just used the last word, the last line, and it said she was meant to be, with a period. And that seemed very matter of fact. And I was done. I glued that down with some Yoo-Hoo, and we're good to go. Then when I started taking photos, I put them on a piece of Yuletide paper that I designed for 7 Dot Studio, and that's it. You can click here to see Jen's video. And also, you guys, we have a $25 gift certificate to Michael's to give away. If anybody wants to enter our challenge or is inspired, definitely visit my blog. There's a link up there, super easy. Just add your link, and you'll be entered to win the $25 gift certificate. You know, I said to Michael's, but I'm going to reverse, because I think it might actually be to Amazon. Jen has that, so I'll definitely get the information for that and write that down below. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to come back next month with some mixed media tutorials for you.